Hi, I'm Chris Ploof.
And I'm Jim Binion, and we're here today to talk to you about Damasteel.
Damasteel is stainless Damascus steel, and it works a little bit differently than the materials that you might be used to, so we're here to give you some expert tech tips. So one of the nice things about a stainless steel Damascus is it's actually relatively easy to cut. We did a little bit of pre-cutting here, so you don't have to watch us cut for a long time, but using a standard jeweler's saw blade works just fine, and select something appropriate to the thickness of the material that you're trying to cut. One of the things though that we've definitely noticed is you really do need to use a very stiff saw frame. So this is the new concept saw frame. This one works fine, and there's some others, other saw frames in the market that work great, but we find it really helps and keeps you from breaking blades. If you're good at sawing, you're going to be more likely to dull blades than break them. So you definitely also want to use a fair amount of burr life also. I tend to usually put some on the piece that I'm working on. Also coat the saw blade at regular intervals with it. And we're going to show you how easy this is to cut. This is about 2 millimeters thick, and what I'm doing here is we're cutting a little ring blank out that will then do a little bit of work too, and we'll show you how to anneal it. So we have our little piece of stainless steel here now, and what we're going to do is bend this around into a ring, but I want to just do a little bit more stock preparation to it. So one of the tools that I love for that, because you can get some really heavy-duty abrasives for it, is a little Fordham angle grinder. And I'm just going to clean up the edges really quick with that. So I can hear you saying, but what if I don't have a Fordham angle grinder? Well, you should. They're great tools, but files work fine as well. So if you need to take an end down, you can also file it just with a standard file. You know, and here's a quick note about this. I actually, in my own shop, do use the same tools back and forth that I use for precious metals, but I do card out my files and make sure they're good and clean before I actually start working on them. And I do, in the bottom of my sweeps drawer in my bench, I'll put down a file folder or some other form of paper just to capture all of the stainless steel fines that fall down into there, because you don't really want to mix these in with your refining if you can help it. It's not the end of the world, but definitely let your refiner know that you are working with stainless steel and other metals so that they can tailor the way they refine your material to good returns for you, so you don't end up losing out because you're working with a little bit of stainless steel. So we're going to talk about annealing this stainless steel Damascus right now. You do need to anneal it. It does work hard just like any other metal. The good news is it's actually easy to anneal. We're going to use an oxygen propane torch here, the Smith Little torch, but any oxygen and fuel torch will work for this. You do need to get it pretty hot when you go to anneal it. It's actually going to anneal at about 1900 degrees, so really hotter than anything else that you've annealed. You're going to see as I anneal this that we're going to get it very, very bright in color, much brighter than, say, your standard silver. I mean, you're annealing almost at 800 or so degrees above what silver would anneal at. So you're going to see me get this very bright, and then we're going to quench it into water, and that's a very important step also. The good news is you don't have to worry about melting this. So I'm going to light the torch here, and we're going to turn out the lights, and we're going to show you how hot you need to get this to anneal it. So one of the other things that you might be able to see that's really interesting too is stainless steel takes a beautiful heat patina. You can get a gorgeous range of sort of blues and purples and straw colors and yellow and peacock, and really, really beautiful surface treatment that you can do. Unfortunately, it doesn't last, so not really suitable for jewelry with high wear, but it's something really beautiful you can do to the stainless steel. So right about now, this orange that you see that's starting to creep in here, this is where I'd start to be getting ready to stop annealing if this was silver. We're going to keep pushing this, and we're going to get it nice and hot. So that bright orange that's there, we're not quite to that yellow heat, but this bright orange here, and we've turned down the lights as we said, so this is a pretty dimly lit room. This is where you want to anneal your stainless steel to. Another note about torches, I did say that you could use a fuel gas and oxygen torch. I avoid acetylene because it's really a dirty gas. I really like propane or natural gas. So, all right, we've got this, so the whole piece was up to that temperature, so I'm going to turn off the torch and quench it. Right into water. Yeah. And we're annealed. So here's our piece of annealed steel. You notice it's got heavy oxides on it, a little less oxide on the bottom where it was resting on our soldering and annealing surface. But what we need to do is we need to remove that now, and this oxide is tenacious. Really, if you're going to try and mechanically remove it, you're going to be going back to about a 240 paper or lower even, 180, 120 even to grind it off. But one of the things that you can do to remove it is just like any other material, you can pickle this.
I'm going to show how to bend up one of these blanks into a ring. You're going to need a tool like this ring bender because you need a little bit more mechanical advantage because the stainless is stiffer to work with than what you're probably used to working with. So a tool like this is really necessary. So I'm going to use the bender to start putting a curvature in the piece. And as you can see, it does take a bit of force to move it, but it does move. And you may be used to forming up a ring by bending it into a D shape and then trying to turn it back to a round. That doesn't really work very well with the stainless steel. Because of the force required, you will probably pop the solder joint if you try and do that. So again, you want to use a tool like a ring bender to get it into a round shape. So we've gotten it about as far as we can go with this die. So I'll change out dies to a smaller radius and we'll keep bending it around till we get it to close. So this is just about as much as we're going to be able to get with the ring bender. So it's still open a little bit. So now we're going to move to the ring shrinker to close this up and to round it up a little bit more. One of the things that can be helpful when doing this is to put a little bit of burr life on the ring. And in the die. And you may need to anneal it at this point. It's starting to get a little springy and it's not really wanting to close up. So at this point, I think it's best to stop and we'll anneal and come back to do the final closing on this. So I've annealed the ring and now we're going to try and finish up closing it down in the ring shrinker, and you'll notice that it does have a little bit of discoloration on it. I haven't pickled it totally clean, but for this stage that's not really necessary. So I'll put a little bit more burr life on it. We'll go back here in the shrinking die and we'll close it down a bit tighter, and that really helped. It's closed down quite a bit more. And at this point, we've gotten just about all we're going to get out of the ring shrinker. And we'll have to give it a couple of taps with a hammer to do the final closing of the ring, but we're pretty close now. Okay, so now I'm going to tap the ring closed. So I'm going to take a dead blow mallet and I'm going to just work on deforming it just enough. So that's brought it a little tighter. Now I'm going to go over and use a saw to clean up the area in between. And then we'll do one more round under the ring shrinker, and then we should be ready to solder. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to square up the ends of the ring blank. And a really easy way to do this is to run a saw blade in between the ends of the blank so that we get a nice straight even cut and make it much easier to solder. And you want to try and hold the blank so that the ends are in tension and kind of pressing against the saw blade. And that's it. And at this point, we'll move back to the ring shrinker to do the final tightening on this, and then we'll be ready to solder. Okay, so let's do the final bit of straightening up of this band so that we can solder it. So you can see we're almost there. Nice and tight. All right, so should be pretty good. We'll give it just a little tap and that'll be close enough to solder it together. Just final little bit of adjustment here. All right. I think we're ready to go. Okay, so now going to solder the ends of the stainless steel Damascus ring blank together. And we're going to need to use a different kind of flux than the one you're normally used to using. This is a boron modified flux. It's called type B1, or sometimes people call it black flux. And you can see by the color why it's called black flux. This is used for soldering high temperature metals and is really needed for soldering stainless steel. So first thing we're going to do is get a little bit of the flux and we're going to apply a fairly liberal amount both sides of the ring, and we'll start heating up. And we really want to make sure that we have a very good flux coat while we're doing this. So, gonna keep spreading it around as it's starting to dry up here. Make sure that we get really good coating. The nice thing about stainless steel is it doesn't transfer heat very well. So you can just spot heat, unlike working on some of the other metals. All right, and that's it. So we're done with soldering and pickling of the ring, and as you can see, there's still some fairly heavy black oxide on there, and that'll come off in the multi-etch. The other thing to talk about is what kind of solder are we using on these? The best solder, in my opinion, for color match and strength is 19 karat white solder. It's got almost exactly the same color as the stainless steel, and it's a very high strength solder. So it's my go-to when I go to solder the stainless if I'm not going to attach some other metal like a yellow gold to it. If I'm going to attach yellow gold to it, then I'm going to want to use an 18 karat yellow solder. Sometimes I might use a 14 karat, say if I'm attaching a 14 karat piece to it, but otherwise I stick with the 18 karat or 19 karat solders. The flux protected the joint from the oxides, but you can see on either side of the joint itself that there's heavy black oxide that forms. You do have to be quick when you're doing soldering of stainless steel. If you stay on it too long with the heat, the oxides are going to creep in and they're going to prevent the solder from flowing. If that happens, you need to go back and clean everything back to bright metal before you start to solder again. You may ask, why not use silver solder? And the reason that you don't want to use silver solder is that it's really not compatible with the metals in the stainless steel, and it's going to form a fairly weak joint if you use it. So you really do want to stick with the karat gold solders for soldering on the stainless steel for our purposes. So we're going to show you how to use the split lap in this video. So let's start the motor. First we're going to add a little compound to the lap and bring the ring up, and now you can see the ring through the lap. This is the great thing about the split lap, is you can actually see where you're polishing. Unlike any other means of polishing, you can actually see the contact surface between the ring and the lap. And as you're working, you're going to want to keep the ring rotating and moving constantly, because if you stop, you're going to put a flat spot on the ring. It's a very aggressive polishing compound, and the wheel is very aggressive, but it really removes scratches really fast. It gives you a beautiful surface when you're done. As you're working with it, you want to constantly be applying compound. You can do the sides as well. You'll get nice, super flat sides, and everything will just be really nice and smooth and ready for your next final polishing or etching or whatever your next step is going to be. But this will get rid of a lot of the scratches and dings that might be in the ring already. It's a very quick way to finish up hard metals. Stainless steel and platinum both really work well on the split lap. It's also good for softer metals, but you do have to pay more attention to how fast it will flatten spots on it. So you do want to keep the work constantly moving, and it's especially important on softer metals to do that. But it's a wonderful tool, and you shouldn't be afraid of working with it, and it'll give you finishes like you wouldn't believe. So now we're going to talk about how to etch the stainless steel Damascus. The stainless steel Damascus is made from 304 and 316 stainless steel. The 304 is attacked fairly readily by the ferric chloride in this etching mordant, and the 316 is fairly resistant to it. So when we put it in the mordant, it's going to attack the 304, it's going to darken it quite a bit, and it's going to etch the 304 away. It'll take about 10 to 15 minutes to get a sufficient etch to really see the amount of etching that's going on. So we're going to go ahead and pick it up and put it in the etchant. And then in about 10 minutes, we're going to come back and take a look at it. So now that we've waited about 10 minutes, we're going to take a look and see where the etching is at for the ring. And you can see how the 304 is turned dark and how it's been etched away by the reaction of the etching mordant. We're going to rinse it off. And now you can see we have a really nice pattern, very visible on the surface of the material. And you'll also see that even at this point, it's very hard to see where we soldered it together. This is where the solder seam is on the ring. And you may catch just the slightest hint of where the solder is, but it still is a really good color match. When we go to look on the inside, there's still a little bit of the solder left on the surface, and you can see the shine there right in the very middle of the ring, right in front of the tweezers. But once we polish the ring back up, you just won't be able to see it. That's the advantage in using the 19 karat white solder.
We hope this video was helpful. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, please contact Rio.